Welcome back to another episode of Excuse My Grandma. This week it is just Kim. Grandma Gail isn't joining us because I thought we would do something a little bit special today. Today I'm going to give a brief overview about the business side of Excuse My Grandma, how you make money as an influencer, and all of that good stuff. We get a lot of questions about it. I just don't typically get into it because usually we're, having fun, and Grandma honestly is the talent, as I say. She knows about the business deals that we're doing. I obviously loop her in. She's totally welcome on some meetings, but most of the time I'm doing the behind the scenes stuff, either producing, editing, making calls with brands to do partnerships. So I'm going to answer all of those questions about turning Excuse My Grandma into a business. This is my second solo episode, by the way. And the first one you could catch back a few episodes ago, probably about a month or two now, where I kind of talked about my upbringing, kindergarten or birth through college, really, and what led me to Excuse My Grandma. So now we're in the world of Excuse My Grandma, and I'm really excited for you all to still get to know me better by doing these solo episodes and learn a little bit about Excuse My Grandma and how it got started as a business. So the idea originated during the pandemic. I was working as a journalist. I was a producer and an on-air reporter for a network called Cheddar, which is a streaming news network, mostly focused on business news, kind of like a MSNBC for millennials, bipartisan. And I really worked my way up there. I started as a production assistant and was constantly trying to prove myself and show how I could be a full-fledged producer. And I always looked at the anchors and really looked up to them. I wasn't sure I wanted to be an anchor per se, but I knew I wanted to be on air. I wanted to produce my own segments. So eventually, after proving myself for a little bit, they gave me my own hit, as they call it, my own segment called Here For It, where I would report on entertainment news. I loved it there. It's where I started really understanding media, totally separate from the influencer world. But during the pandemic, we went remote. And the first year I lived in New York City and the Hamptons with my family, and my grandparents were also here. The second year of the pandemic, when we had that second wave, my grandparents went to Palm Beach and I came with them. I grew up going there my whole life. They had also always been there. They've probably been in Palm Beach like 50 years or whatever. And so I spent time there with them, and I always knew I sort of wanted to do something with my grandma. She is such a character, as you guys all know, and I think that I didn't know what it would be, but podcasts were on the rise and everyone was talking about podcasts. And I loved this show called Call Her Daddy. Some people are probably familiar with it. Now a lot of people are familiar with it. At the time, it was these two girls who had a podcast on a network called Barstool Sports. And they had only had like 10 episodes. And I was obsessed with them. An ex-boyfriend actually showed them to me and was like, I love Barstool and they have girls on it now. And I was like, oh, not only do they have girls on it, but they have these funny, creative, what ended up being one of them, a mastermind in my opinion, when it comes to podcast and entrepreneurship within the media space. Her name's Alex Cooper. And I started to look at them more so than the people at my job and being like, wait, that's what I want to be. And I didn't want to be another 20-something-year-old girl who's like, I'm going to start a podcast with my friend or alone. Like, yes, I want attention sometimes, and like I want my voice heard, as we all do, but not in that way. I wanted it to be deeper. I wanted it to be different. Otherwise, I knew it would fail. So I was like, you know who people really like listening to? My best friend, my Grandma Gail. So I don't know why I thought grandma more than my mom. My mom is also a huge character. I think my grandma says yes to more things. And like would have these funny quips. And I think you see a mom and daughter sometimes on social media or out in the world. It's more rare to see a mom to see a granddaughter, grandmother duo. So I felt like my initial goals with that was having fun, having these lighthearted conversations about generational differences, specifically when it came to dating, because I was looking at Call Her Daddy and I was thinking, it's a dating and sex podcast. People love that. How funny if we had the same conversations, but with a grandma. So it started off really all dating. And I eventually wanted to, if that became successful, leave my job and create a media empire, essentially, which I'm still on the way to. Launching the podcast. Here's where I'm going to try to give advice to everyone. There are some technical hurdles that people don't even want to start a podcast because they're like, I don't know how, I don't have a producing background or an editing background. Like, what kind of tech do you need? I'll talk about some of my early challenges. I did a lot of Googling, and it's actually not difficult. And I'm saying that obviously with a little bit of, I had background in this world, so maybe it would have been a little bit more difficult, but largely all you need is a microphone, which either can plug into your laptop or it can plug into like a sound mixer. So if it's plugging into your laptop, it's a USB cord. And if it's plugging into a sound mixer, it's an XLR cord. I ordered mine off Amazon. The one I'm using now is a little bit more expensive. I've now upgraded. This is a Shure microphone. Yes. But you don't have to break the bank. The one I was using for the first 3 years was from Amazon, and honestly, they sound exactly the same. I'll link it in our Amazon storefront if people know where to find that. So basically, you need that, and most of them come with both now. So they'll have an XLR input or one that goes into the computer, so you don't have to choose in case you want to play around. The sound mixer, the one I use is called Focusrite. It's called the Scarlett, and there's different editions of it. And that just goes, you plug a microphone in, and on the other side, you plug it into the computer. Then you need something to record sound on your computer. I use Adobe Audition. That's all you need. Now, obviously, I would never suggest to do a podcast if you're not also recording video. Record it with your iPhone or a camera. Record multiple angles. I'm looking at you here. That's my wide shot. I'm looking at you here. That is my solo shot. If grandma's here, there's more cameras. Okay, that's the equipment. Then what you need to start a podcast, to get it out to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you are listening, you need to host your podcast somewhere. That's where you upload your episodes. I've switched hosting platforms, which is what it's called, a few times now. You can Google the ones that are out there. I currently use, it's called Podcasters for Spotify. It was previously Anchor. So I like to host on there because that's currently the only hosting platform that allows for video. So if you're going to listen to the podcast on Spotify, you're also watching it. That doesn't exist yet on Apple. It's just on Spotify. And it's not on Spotify if you're hosting on, let's say, Simplecast or a different platform. So I like to do it internally on Anchor, Podcasters for Spotify. And this is where you upload your podcast, and it creates something called an RSS feed that then goes out to the different platforms where your listeners then can get the podcast. It sounds more complicated than it is. I feel like if you do a simple Google search, you can figure that one out. You want lights, you want to find a place that you can film without, lots of background noise. Right now I'm filming in my basement in my parents' house in the Hamptons. We also record at a studio in New York City that kind of comes with all of these things. So now you don't really need any of that equipment anymore. You could just book a time slot at a podcast recording space that has everything. But this is if you don't want to spend a ton of money and do it from home, because then you just have to make the one-time purchase for the equipment and then you're set, versus $200 or $300 every time you book a studio. I wouldn't do that until you're really taken off the ground with your podcast. We have gone from Grandma Gail's desk in the Hamptons to my apartment in the city to the basement here to the podcast studio. So your podcast is not going to do well unless you also have a social media account, in my experience. Instagram, TikTok. I was posting clips of the podcast on there, but I would say you also need to post regular videos showing everybody your personality. We're kind of moving now into the fact that obviously Excuse My Grandma is not just a podcast. We have our TikTok and our Instagram, which is really a huge part of our brand. That's where you can see what we're up to more frequently. That's where we do our brand partnerships. That's where we have our huge following. So I was having a few viral videos pretty quickly off the gate. In the beginning, it was more me than me and Grandma. So I just got the few random videos here or there where that would go viral, meaning 1 million plus views. And that would kind of be a one-off. People weren't getting to know me. It was just me like talking about dating. Finally, I started to get Grandma a little bit involved. So I don't know if you guys have seen the video where Grandma says, date someone who wants you. And I say, not my type. That's now turned into a series where I say not my type literally about anything that you would want in somebody. It's a joke. But that video went super viral, probably like 10 million views. Same with a video where we were walking on a dock in Sag Harbor and there was yachts and whatever. And Grandma was like, is anyone on that boat? I have a single granddaughter. And we got that on camera, me getting all annoyed at her. And that got 12 million views. But as I said, with those one-off videos, maybe a few people pressed follow, but it was more people were liking them, they were engaging, they were getting millions of views, but we needed people to follow us. So then we made some videos actually introducing ourselves to our audience, showing our relationship rather than just doing trends or existing sounds that were out there. You really had to make original content, I think, to gain a following. So just you doing your makeup looking pretty and like to a song probably isn't going to get you a huge following. You need to, unless you have a very aesthetic page, whatever, most of it is personality based. People follow you because they want to know you and see what you're doing and everything. So once we started doing all of that, I'm like, okay, now we have 10,000 followers, 25,000 followers. And it felt like a time that we were still remote with my job. And I wasn't loving it as much remote. I was dealing with a few other issues, including like tech neck. And just as you guys know, I've gotten neck surgery and everything, but it was just a lot. And I was like, I'm going to quit and focus on Excuse My Grandma full time. So then you're growing. You have to keep putting content out there daily. And then you can start to think about identifying potential sponsors and partners. In the beginning, obviously no one was coming to me and saying, we want you to rep our brand and here's a whole lot of cash. Because we were still small, we hadn't done many partnerships. So in the beginning, I would say tag everybody. If you're doing your makeup, tag every single brand that you're doing your makeup in. If you're wearing a certain outfit, say this is from Alice and Olivia, and you're tagging Alice and Olivia. From small brands to big brands, small ones will probably see this more, but they all have Instagram accounts or TikTok accounts, and they will see the tag and they'll go to your page and you'll be on their radar. Then people started reaching out and saying, okay, we'll send you like product if you do things, or starting to offer to pay you a very small rate at that time. But you start taking those deals and your worth and your rate is whatever your last brand deal was, depending on the budget of the brand, obviously. That's how you start out. So sure, my first video was $3,000, but then to the next person, I say, once we do a few of those deals, okay, we're getting those pretty easily. Now it's $6,000, whatever. And you kind of see where the market is, you see the budget of the brand, and you negotiate every deal to feel like it's the right rate for your brand. Here's some other things that are important that I did not struggle with, which I think was lucky, but everyone should keep this in mind. Brand identity and having a clear voice. Do not be all over the place. People want to go to your page and know exactly what it's about, know exactly what they're going to get if they follow you. That doesn't say like every video has to be exactly the same or every video has to be about food. It just has to be that they know who you are and what you represent. The other thing you need to become successful as an influencer or an entrepreneur in general is the confidence that you're not going to fail. You can have really zero self-doubt in a job like this. I acknowledge I had some financial safety. I'd worked for, 3 years at that point. I had my family's support. But this business really didn't cost that much to start because you're just making videos. You have an iPhone already or whatever. So I felt comfortable at that point being able to do that. I know that's a privilege, but I think you have to really believe that, yep, I'm going to be the next Alex Cooper, for example, somebody I looked up to. You have to believe in yourself because otherwise who's going to? Some key milestones I had in the early days, naming, excuse my grandma, that was probably the thing I struggled with most. I think I had the idea and was ready to record with her about 5 months before I actually even started with her, because I didn't have that name. So I wish I started 5 months earlier. I feel like I would have been ahead of the curve in a few ways, but naming is really, really hard. And if you can come up with a good one, great. I think that you shouldn't rush into anything. I think our name ended up being amazing. So I'm happy I waited, but it's a big deal. Planning out the launch of a first episode. I feel like there was so much stake in it, as there should be. I really thought about the questions I was going to ask my grandma. I had like a whole outline. My episodes now, like obviously when we have guests on, I'm putting thought into it, but it's less of a big deal when you've done it a million times. Reaching those milestones on social media, whether it be 10,000 followers or 1 million views on a video, getting your first guest on a podcast is always a big deal. And then eventually being recognized in notable media outlets. So whether, in the beginning for us, we had a New York Times article. Today, we were on Tamron Hall. We were on The Rachel Ray Show. It started to feel real. And I think grandma started to see it. I didn't talk at all about the, not shame, but like weird looks, I guess, you get when you tell people that you are going to do content creation full time. Now it's a little less taboo. People have seen the influencer economy. They've seen so many people doing this. But it's still like, oh, you're not going to be in an office job anymore. Like you're going to just do your little videos. Like that's the energy you're going to get from a lot of people, including my own grandma. She was like, we're having fun. That whenever her friends would go over to her, they would say like, oh, your cute podcast. And she'd be like, we're having fun, which we are having fun. Of course, that's the number one. But also, once we started doing big brand deals with companies she knew, she was like, oh, wow, this actually is a business. And unfortunately, I always saw it, but some people need to, get that recognition or that cash to actually believe it. But don't ever feel like you need to tell people that either. Like, yeah, I even run into this now. Like, people are like, oh, like, you do that full time? Like, people actually ask me all the time, like, do you make money? Or like, how much do you make? If I was a lawyer, could you imagine if someone said that to me? Like, it's rude and it's like tacky. But sometimes I even struggle with this where I have to feel like I have to preface with people. It's like, yeah, and I make so much more. I make more than I used to, whatever. And it's like, you don't have to tell people shit. When it comes to posting content, I think it is important to have a content strategy. Post anything you can, post as much as you can, but remember to be authentic, to be relatable. When people are commenting things they want to see, actually take that into consideration, because if you post a video about that, odds are it's going to do well because that's what people want to see with you. Engage with your community. I go through and I like every single positive message. When you're posting on TikTok, post the same exact video to your Instagram, and your YouTube shorts. Like, why not post on every platform if you have the content and you can grow audiences on each one? I'm a believer of it's gonna perform pretty similarly on every platform. Some people are like, I would never post what I post on Instagram on TikTok because it's not gonna do well. Personally, I don't have that. Know your content. If you're only posting pretty food pictures, like, I don't know, you would obviously have to adjust what the content would be on TikTok. Like, maybe you're doing a voiceover video, how much you loved the restaurant you went to, rather than just like a picture of a hot dog. I don't know why I thought hot dog. Okay, a little bit on monetization. When it comes to sponsorships, let me explain a little bit the process for those who don't know. So you can work on a flat fee. So you can say to a brand, my rate for one TikTok is $5,000. Or you can do commission-based, like, affiliate links. So you can say to a brand, can I have a special link or a code, discount code, for your brand's products and get a commission off of how much is sold. I don't like to do that because you don't really know how your audience is going to respond to something, and then you've done the work and you're potentially not making that much money. Maybe if you can, do a flat fee plus an affiliate link. That's my thought on that. Merchandise, another way to make money. Depends. Like, for us, we have our Not My Type hats. That's really for super fans and stuff. I wouldn't just bank on merch for your major money maker. And when it comes to the brand partnerships and collaborations, have it make sense. Like, for us, we're not going to do, like, Grandma and I are going to talk about a vibrator. Like, it's just not on brand for us. We like things that appeal to both generations, things we actually do. For example, Amazon, obviously we both use. OxyClean, we both use in our house. Hulu, we both love to watch. Things like that like make sense for you. Practical tips for this. How to approach brands and pitch to collaborations. It's helpful to have an outreach email. Find the email for the brand that you want to work with. Sometimes it's hard to find it, but find it. And obviously you're going to tag them in videos when you're posting about them, but then you're going to have your email to connect to these companies, and it could be the same for every company. Obviously you have to make a few switches. A little bit about you, and then say, we would love to work together. We have great exposure. Here's our following, and let us know if you have any campaigns coming up that we would be a good fit for. Usually, in my experience, if the brands want to find you, they find you, and that's how I make the most money. But sometimes you never know. Once you already have a relationship with a certain company, you can reach out to them and be like, is there anything coming up? And things can come that way. Also, I've been talking about reaching out to the brands. I don't always work directly with the brand. A lot of the time we work with an influencer agency who's sort of like a middleman that the brand hired to do their influencer partnerships. And they'll be the ones to reach out to us, and they're the ones who we're negotiating with. They'll present an offer to the client. The client will accept or not. And then going forward, we're sort of operating through that influencer agency. And those are the ones who, really are aware of the deals that are going on, and they probably represent multiple brands. Negotiating deals and going through contracts is actually a really big part of being an influencer, which you might not realize. Of course, you might have a manager, you might have an agent. I'll get a little bit into representation later. But all influencer contracts pretty much look the same. I personally go through an LLC. I don't like having everything be Kim Merstein. I like it being under our company. So especially with contracts, I would recommend that. Kind of get used to what a influencer contract looks like. I can do another episode on that if people are interested in the ins and outs of that. And you have to be a good negotiator with this stuff and know your worth. And if you're really bad at it, like hire someone on your team or get a manager or hire one of these like agencies that are specifically representing influencers who do this all day long back and forward. But most people, unless they're like teenagers who are big stars, like can probably handle it. Don't let someone lowball you. You know what you're worth. You know what you have to offer. Start with a number that you think is fair. And if they react and say yes right away, you might be like, oh, I could have asked for more. Or if they're like, whoa, that's way out of your ballpark, that will also be informative. So just reflecting on what we sort of learned here today, high level, I know we didn't get into every little thing, but what I've learned through this journey is if you have an idea, do it. Don't be like, oh, I had that idea and now I see this other person's doing it, or like, how is that going to happen? Like, if you have an idea that you really think is good, you should really do it, because I think if you believe in it, it'll happen and people will also think it's good. Never have imposter syndrome. Again, personal brand is so, so important. I think there's two creator types out there. I think there's the aesthetic kind of pretty feeds, or they're instructional and they're teaching you how to cook, or they're teaching you how to style your clothes. And then there's the personality, where I think we fit into a little bit more, a lot of talking to the camera, a lot of sharing about your life and where you're going and what you're doing. Decide which category you fall in. Consistency is key. Post every single day, if not multiple times a day. Be able to pivot. If you are doing some sort of series and people aren't liking it, they're not liking it. If they are asking for something else, try that and see if they would like that. Again, promote your stuff on multiple platforms. Don't just post on Instagram, post on TikTok and YouTube and everything. You never know what's going to happen with TikTok. So it's always important to have an audience everywhere. And just looking forward now, for Excuse My Grandma, there's a lot that we want to do. I think the number one thing is I've been seeing a huge shift from the personal brand to creating a community, both online and offline. We would love to do some in-person things to meet everybody. We would love to expand our community and get more people involved, and really just feel like you know us and are part of the Excuse My Grandma family. And there's lots of ways we're planning on doing that. We're planning on doing some really exciting collaborations. We're taking the brand outside of just the podcast and the social media world. And I'm so excited for everyone to come with us. I hope this gives a little bit more insight into how we make money, the brands we like to work with, and really how to get started off the ground, whether you're a podcaster or a traditional social media influencer. And let me know if you enjoyed this episode, and next solo, what you want to hear from me, whether it's a dating story or more about the business or my college experience, or whatever you want to know. And I can tell some secrets about Grandma Gail. She's not here anyway. All right. I love you guys. Bye.